Everybody, someone has rightly said, write to be understood, speak to be heard, and read to grow. Yes, with that thought in mind today, let's start our Friday's episode with a bang. And here I am, Sapna Mahadevan, your host for this evening. Again, welcoming you back with another fictional story writing genre. And we are again going to learn a lot of tips, a lot of insights in today's episode as well. Of course, curated with a lot of fun elements too for all of my dear viewers for today. I hope you're going to have a fun time in today's episode, learning all the little nuances of how you can be writing a short story all by yourself. Today's genre is going to be all about horror and how you can induce the fear factor in your readers, right? So, with that thought in mind, let's move ahead into our episode for today. Here we are, the fiction story writing masterclass. Unleash the writer in you, have lots of imagination, and try coming up with an original plot which is going to frighten your audiences. Yes. And let me tell you that this scare or the fear that the audiences have, it's going to be in a way really going to absorb them into the story. And that is what, as creators, we want to achieve, isn't it? We want our readers to go back satisfied, to have that feeling of wow when they read our books. Yes. So today let's again look at some of the coming up segments. Like always, we have the essential tips, plot building pointers, how you can be writing an interesting plot, how you can maybe develop a story idea into a full-fledged story plot, and also make it shine with all of the fine tuning that you do to it, right? Apart from that, we also have the Google It words, which are really going to help you with your vocabulary. There's the recommendation of the day. There are going to be icebreaker questions, and we'll get to know each other better through those icebreaker questions. Yes. And yes, by the end of the episode, I will also be giving you a quick refresher of all the insights that we have had in this episode of today. And that's really going to aid you in your story writing process, right? So here we are into today's episode. Let's start with equal excitement as we always do. And the first thing that comes up here as I move ahead into the episode is the icebreaker question. Yes. So there is my first icebreaker question for all of you. If you could be a superhero, what would you choose your superpower to be? That's the first question in our icebreaker segment. And quickly in the chat box, think about all the inspiration that you have had watching superhero movies, watching super fantasy movies, right? And think about what is that one superpower that you would want to imbibe. Yes, that's the first question there. And okay, if I check my comments here, I get a lot of hellos in the chat box. Good evening to you all too. I have had a real great day today. Um, yes, Nilima, thanks a lot for joining there. So yes, quickly in the chat box, answers to this first icebreaker question. What would you choose your superpower to be? That's the first question there. Okay. Great. So let me check for some of the answers here. Telepathy. Okay. Um, that's something that really sounds interesting, though. So let me tell my audience members here. For the uninitiated, telepathy would mean some kind of a connect that you have with people, right? And maybe you can, like sometimes, it happens, you're thinking about someone and suddenly they call you up, right? So that's called telepathy, when you have that internal connect with the person, right? Okay, another superpower coming up here. Krishna tells me reading thoughts. That's interesting too. I think, but it can land us into trouble also, Krishna. Yes, if these are positive thoughts, then good. But if there is something negative that we read through people's minds, then I don't know, it's going to be troublesome, isn't it, Krishna? Yes. Okay, and then let me also check what's the next thing that comes up here. Okay, so teleportation is one of those superpowers that Varun would want to have. So that means teleportation is when um, you can somehow travel into the future or into the past, or maybe also not moving physically from one place to another but still getting transported. Yes, so teleportation it is. And great, yes, thanks a lot for all of these answers, and let's move ahead to the next segment. We have here, what's the genre, right? So let me tell you, the genre that we have here is horror for today, and again, a genre of speculative fiction which is intended to frighten your audiences and throw them off their seats. Yes, think of all the terms that come to your mind when you're thinking about fear or being petrified, right? So that's what horror does to us. And for today's genre, let me also tell you the subgenre for the day, that is the category in which we are going to explore our story writing process for today, is going to be vampire horror. Yes, doesn't it get even more exciting there, right? So let me tell you that English literature, it popularized the vampire stories, which were basically just ghost stories or maybe the dead returning to haunt the living. And it wasn't until the slow burn success of Dracula. Everyone knows Dracula, isn't it? So the success of Dracula is what helped launch these vampire stories into the mainstream, right? So that's how vampire as a genre took shape. And today, let's learn some of the basic tips and tricks on how we can be writing a vampire horror all by ourselves, right? So before we move any further, I have another icebreaker question there, and the question is, if you could be invisible for one day only, then what would you do? That's the next question that we have here. Being invisible for a day, what would you do? Yes, so quickly type out your answers there. I think I'm going to get some amusing answers here in the chat box. I can think of Mr. India, the Bollywood movie, an old one. But yes, that was one movie which this invisibility aspect was rightly shown, isn't it? So, yes, being invisible, what would you want to do? Okay, and I have a comment there. It says, play pranks on friends, right? Okay, great. So, that's what is the first thing that comes to our mind, playing mischief. Yes, helping the poor. Lovely. Okay, so Tarun here tells me that he would travel the world without paying ticket fare. Okay, interesting, Tarun. Yes, of course, we are invisible, isn't it? Wow, so if you come to think about it, so many, you can get really creative, isn't it? Great. So keep pondering on this question here, and you can answer me in the chat box. I'll definitely come back and check all of your answers there, right? That was the second icebreaker question for the day. And now I'm going to quickly move ahead to the next segment. It is about establishing the essentials, right? So, again, in today's episode, I'm going to talk about three important factors that we want to focus on while writing a vampire horror story. All of those three elements coming up here right on the screen. We have the horror element, then there are the characters, and also the setting, right? So let's look at each one of them in greater detail. The first one that we have here is the horror element. And again, the horror element in your story, it can be generated from a wide array of choices. So it could be anything from maybe supernatural to dead spirits to ghosts or any other related creature, right? But since this is a special vampire story, you can always think about the concept of day and night. That means that darkness and the night time is something that we want our setting to be off, right? And we can also talk about werewolves along with vampires. And as all of us know, werewolves are sworn enemies of vampires. And we can talk about the bloodlust of the vampires and how they pass on this fear to their readers, right? So that's how the horror element is going to come from. Induce the horror element, tap into the basic fears that people have. And since the story is about vampires, that is our main focus, right? So this was about the horror element. Tanu Karan, thanks a lot for that like there. And let's also move ahead to check the second element here, which is the characters, right? So let me tell you that in a vampire horror story, most usually the vampires are also the protagonist of our story. And apart from that, you can also talk about other characters as central characters when they are the ones who are experiencing this fear firsthand, right? So both it works both ways. And then of course there are certain prime rules for these characters. If you're keeping vampires as your protagonist, there should be something that could actually slay the vampires, right? So think about what is that one element by which the vampires can be eradicated. And you can have a wooden stake maybe, or any other mechanism. Maybe werewolves are their enemies, so maybe you can show a conflict between these two elements there. And then they should also have superhuman skills. In most of the movies we have seen that vampires are really cold blooded, they have cold body temperatures, they have this fast speed, and they just get in a whoosh, they just get transported anywhere. And then their eye color changes, right? So many other physical changes that we keep seeing in a vampire. If you have seen a vampire movie, or if you have read anything to do with vampires, you would know what I'm talking about, right? So these are all the characterizations that you can be mentioning in your story as well. And apart from the characters, let's also look at the third element that we have here, which is the setting. Now, the setting of any story is always the sense of place, right? So, what is the background in which the vampires are? Usually you find them. Yes. So there has to be a blend, because here, you can talk about vampires inhabiting in some abandoned place, a dilapidated building maybe, or somewhere where there is not much of a crowd. Yes. But of course, to move our plot ahead, they are going to visit mortal planes like urban cities and towns, and they are going to mingle with the human race, right? So the story is going to be set in both of these worlds. You can be showcasing that they are originating from this abandoned place, and then they are mingling with the human race. And if that is happening, then your setting is going to be a very familiar place for all of your readers, right? So that's how the setting of your story changes depending upon what is the plot that you're going to carry on for your story, right? Now, after all of these three elements here, Mm, let me read some of the comments here. Asha, Arun, hi there. Good evening to you. Um, Lovely to have you in the live episode today. And um, great. Okay. Um, Joseph, yes. Good evening to you too. And yes, let's get going back to our episode. We already saw what the prerequisites are, and some of the prerequisites that we really have to focus on, right? And after that, let me move ahead to the second icebreaker question. This is, if you could visit one planet in the universe, which one would it be? That's the next question that we have here. One planet, if you get to visit in the universe, then I want to see what is your choice of that planet. Which planet would you like to go to? Yes. Okay. So let me see quickly some answers there in the chat box. And I don't know, maybe one day that's also going to be a possibility, isn't it, in the near future, right? Maybe maybe decades down the line, you never know how science and technology progresses, isn't it? Mm, if a few decades back we would have said that man could be able to fly and visit other places, then we would have really scorned at, or maybe laughed at the person, right? But today that's a possibility with airplanes and aircrafts and all the technology, right? So who knows, maybe one day we'll also be able to visit planets, right? Great. Okay. Yes is the comment that I get there. And then Mercury comes up here. Mercury, okay. Um, then there's Mars, because we want to find whether Mars is it has water and air and oxygen, right? Yes. Um, I still remember the time when this was really in news, when it just started coming up that, whether Mars can be inhabited in, and how will that work and all of that. And I remember as a young girl, I used to think, and just a thought that used to come to my mind, that if really, people got transported to Mars and then started living there, then if we would send postal messages, then we would have to write the country, and then maybe the continent, and then also planet Earth, right? So it sounds so amusing to just think about it. But yes, these are thoughts that comes to your mind, and curiosity, let me tell you, is one thing that should be kindled. And curiosity in little children is something that should be really, really encouraged. Yes, that's what I feel, because only if you're curious you get new inventions. Yes. So yes, some nostalgia there. And Asha says Mars. So I think, yes, Asha, you want to know whether we can inhabit that place, isn't it? Okay. And we have Jupiter come up here, because Jupiter is the largest planet. Okay, great. Lovely. So thanks a lot for all of these answers. And it's really, really fun having a conversation with all of you in the chat box here. And some years down the line, who would have thought even this is possible, isn't it? Okay. So, yes, let's move ahead and go into our next segment, which is expert tips on establishing the essentials, right? So, again, we are back on track here. And the first expert tip that we have here for writing a vampire horror is that you need to really emotionally involve your readers into the story and also into the characters, right? So let me tell you that while you are reading a book, only if you are emotionally invested into that character, or only if that character is a likable one, yes, only then you're going to be deeply impacted with what is going to happen to them, right? So in a vampire horror, or even in a horror story, you want to stir up that emotional connect with your readers, and that would come by the way you write your story. Yes. So this kind of fear, that which stirs the emotions and makes us afraid that we lose someone whom we deeply care about, is the most powerful kind of fear, right? You might agree with me on that. And without this empathy, all the fearful events that the characters experience, are throughout the story, that's not going to be as harrowing to read, right? So that's the first thing that we want to do here: make our characters likable and emotionally invest into them for our readers. Yes. Now, after that, the second expert tip we have here is that horror is always a contrast between the comfort of the familiar and the discomfort of the unknown, right? So the best way to create a horror element is to begin your story with your characters in a familiar environment, in an environment which is a safe haven for them. It's a familiar place. They are really very comfortable in that place. And then you can just throw them off that comfort and familiarity, and then you place them into a zone which is full of discomfort, and that's how the fear is going to get intensified, right? So that's the second expert tip here: identify what your reader is going to connect with. And with that expert tip here, let's move ahead to the first Google it word that we have for today, which is discomfort. Okay, now let me tell you, discomfort is feeling uneasy or maybe anxious. You're not comfortable, and that's why discomfort is the opposite or antonym of comfort, and it means that you feel uneasy or unsettled, right? So that's the word discomfort. Do check that word in Google, and do not forget to jot down that word in your Google journal. Yes. Now, with that, let me move ahead to the next segment. We have another icebreaker question come up here. Would you rather be smart or incredibly funny? That's the next question that we have here. So think about this. What is the choice that you would want to go for? Be smart or incredibly funny? I think I would like to be smart. Yes. What about you? Quickly in the comment box. Okay, smart is the answer that I get here. Incredibly funny also comes up there. Funny is another one. Smart comes up there. Both. Lovely. Thanks a lot again for all of these answers here. Mixed bag of responses. And let's move ahead to the next segment. It is the movie title trivia, right? So here I'm going to show you some pictures, and you need to guess these popular vampire horror movie titles, right? So I'm going to get to know in a while if the horror is one of your favorite genres or not, right? So this is the first movie that I'm going in for. And do you know the name of this movie? It's a vampire horror, and the name of the movie in the chat box. There are, let me tell you how many guesses or how many pictures I have for you for today. One, two, three, four. There are five of them that we are going to play with you today. And this is the first one. So quickly in the chat box, give me the name of the movie. Okay, so let me reveal it out. It is Vampire Academy, right? And moving ahead to the second one, there it is. Okay, this is quite a popular one. That is correct. It is Dracula Untold, right? And Dracula, that is right. Yes. Okay, so let's move ahead. The third one for the day. Again, a popular one. We have also given you this movie as a recommendation of the day. And Shweta gives me the correct answer. That is Vampire Diaries. Okay, and then the next one here, there it is. My favorite movie, and I should say my favorite book, because yes, I have read the full series. Um, really an intriguing and an interesting story there. Something really different and unique, right? So let me see if I have answers. Yes, that's the correct one. Of course, it is Twilight Saga, right? And moving ahead to the last one for the day, there we are. What is the name of this movie? Harini tells me I don't watch horror movies. That's okay, Harini. It is a fun game that we are playing according to the genre that we are talking about, right? And the name of this movie is Interview with the Vampire, right? So let's move ahead. If you have any other movies that you have seen in this particular genre, then do write to me here. And I am going to move ahead to plotting the plot, right? So, what are the three important elements in a plot for writing an engaging vampire horror story? That's what we are going to see next. And here it is, all of the three elements. We have the conflict, which is the writer's main tool. And of course, we are also going to talk about the growth of character, and finally, what's going to happen in the end, right? So the first element is the conflict. So whosoever is your lead or protagonist, maybe it's a human or a vampire, they must face a plot driving conflict. And normally we see that when we have vampires as characters in our story, then their sworn enemies, the werewolves, they are also a part of the characterization. And it could be in that way that you raise the conflict for your story. But again, you can come up with your own creativity and think about other conflicts, other clash of interest that the protagonist would have, be it a vampire or be it a human protagonist, right? And let me also tell you that we can also talk about a love interest happening between a vampire and a human, like we saw in the popular book series Twilight Saga, right? And these are some of the aspects that you would want to explore for your story. But of course, in a single plot, there can be one or two more conflicts that you can be including. Yes, so that's about the conflict there, one of writer's main tools, and one of the aspects that is going to create a lot of drama and tension into your story. Yes, now the second factor that we have planted in here is the growth of character. Now let me tell you that all throughout the plot, your characters should be growing. They tend to become warmer and softer from being a ruthless killer. So if we are talking about the vampires here, right, you need to showcase that growth in some key points. And we have one example here, that is the villainous selfish protagonist from the Vampire Diaries turns into an ultimate compassionate central hero, right? So that's the growth of character that we are talking about, and we are going to showcase this to our audiences, right? Asha has a comment here. She says, interesting. Thanks a lot for that, Asha. Great to know that you love the episode that we are bringing out to you. So, yes, if you have any other suggestions, please do write to me in the chat box here. And I'm going to move ahead to the third element, which is the ending, right? Now, that's the denouement part of the story. That's the finale, the climax. And finally, your audiences, your readers get to know what's happening, right? So, always in a vampire horror, the mystery gets resolved. We give a satisfying ending to our readers. The enmity, whatever we showcase as the conflict there, that gets resolved. Or the righteous, they win over the vice, and all of the loose ends are tied together, right? Now, why I am talking about having a satisfying ending for a vampire horror story is that you have heightened the tension all along the story, and now it's time for your audiences to relax, right? So give them that breather, give them that satisfying ending of your story, so that they can go back comforted and relaxed in the feeling that their protagonist is all safe and sound, right? So that's the ending of our story. And so all of these were the plot building pointers. Asha says interesting, and then she says yes, she's liking the episode with that smiley there. Thanks a lot for that, Asha. Really, really glad. And all of these comments here, the love that all of you share in the chat box, that really gets us going. So keep writing to us. Yes. And with that, let me move ahead to the next segment. It is again another synonym, Google it word. The word is enmity, right? So, what does the word enmity mean? It only means to say that the feeling of hostility that we have for someone, or maybe if two people are enemies or foes, then that's the word that we use there, enmity. And it's a noun. Synonyms could be hostility or maybe animosity, right? And I want all of you to write down that word if you're not sure about that word. Enmity is the word, and synonyms are hostility, right? Now, let's move ahead to the next segment. We have the expert tips in plotting the plot, right? So, one of the expert tips that we can be seeing here, there it is on the screen. Yes. So you can also add another interesting literary device, which is foreshadowing into your narrative. And that's another great way to create tension and fear for your readers, right? So this technique, it is usually used by established writers in the genre, and it can be as simple as a shiver running down the character's spine when passing by a locked door, or because they do not know what they can be finding inside, or maybe a feeling of dread when walking down a dark corridor, right? So that's the feeling of dread, the terrible feeling, the gut wrenching feeling that you have when you are already fearsome, and then you pass a dark alley maybe, or some kind of an abandoned place, right? It just stirs up. There's that rumbling in your stomach. Yes, that nerve wrenching feeling is what I'm talking about here. And this can be added into the narrative by the literary device called foreshadowing, right? So that's the first expert tip here. And now for the second expert tip, let me tell you that movie directors, they use pacing to ramp up the fear factor in films. And this same technique can be creatively utilized while you're writing stories as well. So, in the same sense, pacing would mean that, like in movies, when you see that there is a long panned shot which slowly builds up the tension. The Just imagine this visually. The door is loudly creaking, and it's a long shot. You do not know what's inside. The protagonist is trying to peep inside the room, right? And the door makes that creaky noise. And this shot itself goes on for a couple of seconds, right? So that stretched descriptive is what we are talking about here. In the same way, while writing, you can be writing stretched sentences, and this is a good way to create a sense of slowly developing the dread, right? Do not put whatever is ahead of the story in front of your readers immediately, right? Take time, go slow, and gradually build up that dread. So that's another expert tip in catching the audience's fear. And with that expert tip, I have come to the end of the expert tips in plotting the plot. And now for the next word we have in the Google It segment, it is dread, right? So let me tell you, dread would mean worrying about, or maybe being anxious about something, or even when you anticipate that something wrong is going to happen. That anticipation with extreme apprehension and fear is also called dread, right? So yes, that's a strong emotion to have. And do check that word out in Google. Write down that word in your Google It journal and use it wherever appropriate. And it's again going to intensify the fear. Yes, so dread is the last word in our Google It segment. And now let's move ahead to the recommendation of the day. We have a movie for today which is named Legacies, right? So do check this movie out. It is the recommendation of the day. And with that, let's move ahead to the last segment for today. It is the Locate the Words segment. And I'm sure all my lovely audiences who are listening to me intently for quite some time now will figure out all the four words that are hidden in the letter maze, right? So here is the letter maze for today. Quickly find out all of the four words that are hidden in here. And all of these words, let me tell you, are from today's episode. So it may be the Google It words, it could be something about the genre that we spoke about, or it could be one of the factors of the essentials or the plot building pointer. Some way or the other, it's going to be related to the genre that we spoke about today. Okay, so Asha, Arun already giving me correct answers there. Varun, you are right as well. Vinod, thanks a lot for all of those answers. I think I already have three answers there. We have horror, dread, and vampire. That's all correct. I'm so glad that was really, really quick. Kudos to all of you for giving me correct answers. There's one that's left though. Um, Dafia, I think one of them unfortunately is not correct. Okay, vampire is right again. Uh, Wood. Yes, that is right. Okay, so let me give you the answers here. Um, Steak is one of the correct answers, Asha. So, yes, we have all of the words come up here. The first one is horror, and then we have vampire. The next one, eyes. Okay, and then we also have dread. Okay, so there were a lot many words today. Wooden as well. I can give you wood as well. And here it is steak, right? So, yes, all correct words. There were six in number, and I can see that you all have given me correct answers, except for a few. But yes, I am mighty impressed that all of you gave me such quick answers there. Great going. And with that, let's move ahead to the next segment, which is At a Glance. So we come to the end of our episode. And as a norm, I'm going to give you a quick roundup of all the learnings that we have had in today's episode of how you can be writing a vampire horror. Yes. So first things first, the essentials. We are talking about the horror element. It could be the vampires, the werewolves. You can be using foreshadowing as well, or maybe talk about deadly spirits and ghosts. But vampires are going to be the protagonist of our story, and of course, we also talk about the setting. Setting would be an abandoned place, and once these vampires they mingle with the human race, then the setting is going to change. It would be a urban city, maybe a cosmopolitan metropolitan city, maybe a high school, whatever, from your imagination, whatever is the sense of place that you would want to give to your story. That you we should be making our audiences visually think about that place, right? And of course, we also have characters in our story. There are going to be some central characters who are going to face the fear firsthand, and we also can be including werewolves who are sworn enemies of the vampires, and that's how we are also going to induce the clash of interest, right? Now, after these essentials here, let me also talk about some of the plot building pointers. So, of course, we will be having the conflict as one of the factors for an interesting plot. It could also be a love interest between vampires and a human, and how that progresses, because both of them are quite different, and how, even emotionally, how they would be connecting with each other is something that we would love to see in our story. So, yes, we can be also talking about a romantic angle here, but horror is one of those emotions that has to be the focus. Yes. Now, there's also growth of character, and in the ending, we give a satisfying ending to our audiences. We have already heightened that pressure and tension, it's got amplified, and now in the ending, it's time that we loosen up a bit and give a certain comfort to our audiences, right? So that's how our ending is going to be. So after this, at a glance, I'm sure that all of you have had a good understanding of this genre. You can write to me in the chat box if you have any questions. But for now, I have this interesting project work for all of my dear viewers. So do write a short story all by yourselves. Attempt to write a vampire horror story, a spooky one that too, and implement all the learnings that you have had in today's episode. Yes. So that is one thing that I strongly encourage my viewers to be doing. And now for tomorrow, it is a Saturday special, and we will be back again with one of the episodes where we speak about a breakdown of a classic. So tomorrow I will be bringing you a classic story which we will break down into the title, into various other segments, let you know on how you can be writing a story just like the one that we bring to you. And the fun part is that I will be also reciting the story. I'll be giving you a synopsis of the story, right? So that is what we have for tomorrow. Do stay tuned in with me tomorrow as well at 6 p.m. India time. I am Sapna Mahadevan signing out for today, and I hope you have a good time. Keep smiling and stay happy. Bye bye.